The Sports Buffet podcast was spun off Talking High School Sports, a radio show that debuted on AM 1000 WKDE in Alta Vista. We then took our talents to mypodcast.com, and when that site folded, we brought it to youtube.com. So anything that we've done in the past, we still have for the most part, and we're going to bring it to you on our podcast site here on YouTube. So here is a flashback from the old days of Talking High School Sports and the Sports Buffet podcast. Doug Fischer, probably one of the kindest guests we've had. He's joined us ever since the beginning here on the Sports Buffet podcast. He joined me yet again to review some fights, one of which he actually got to see in person, and that was the fight between Arthur Abraham and Andre Ward. It was a Super 6 semifinal. He also reviews Pacquiao and Mosley from a few weeks ago. It's Doug Fischer, ringtv.com, Sports Buffet podcast.
You were live in California this week to see the Super 6 semi with Andre Ward and Arthur Abraham. Andre Ward just keeps getting better and better, it seems. What'd you think?
I thought it was a typical Andre Ward performance. I don't think it was easy for him. I think he had to sort of adjust to Abraham's style, which is kind of tricky. I mean, it looks very one-dimensional, and it can become one-dimensional if Abraham's opponent is able to impose his will and style on Abraham's style. But it's kind of tricky at first. I mean, he's kind of like in that, he has that high guard. I call it the armadillo. I call him Armadillo Abe, he's kind of in that shell, but then he suddenly just explodes with they're wide, sweeping punches, but there's a lot on him. And I think Ward even admitted it. Ward got hit with a real stiff jab from Abraham in the first round, and he realized, okay, this is going to be a dangerous fight. Even if I'm winning every round, this guy's going to be dangerous until the fight's over, until either he stops or we run out of rounds. And he said it was a tough fight afterwards at the post-fight press conference at the Home Depot Center in Carson, California. And even though I scored 10 rounds for Ward, I could tell that it was intense, and I think those are growing experiences. I think Ward's last two opponents were physical. They were strong guys, Saki Obika and Abraham, and these guys are brutes in the ring. And I think that's good for him, particularly if he winds up fighting, Froch, or either guy, actually. Glenn Johnson or Carl Froch. He's going to fight one of those two in the finals of the Super 6. And, as Froch proved against both Andre Jarrell and Jermaine Taylor, he's a rugged dude when he wants to be. He can box smart, but he can also, be sort of like a super middleweight version of Antonio Margarito and just walk a guy down with, take his best and just outwork a better athlete, or a better talented boxer. And of course, Johnson is what he is. He's like, the quintessential pressure fighter and volume puncher for the light heavyweight division. And, he's got a granite chin. So I think the 24 rounds that Ward went with Bika and Abraham, I think they're going to serve him well against either of those two. Because I think both guys are going to try to fight aggressively against him.
Are you surprised Abraham has...
anybody, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Not that that's worked. I said not that fighting aggressively against, Ward has worked, and,
right.
and as Kessler learned, trying to box him from the outside is difficult too, because he's got this sort of chameleon style where he takes away, round by round, he takes away fighters' weapons, whatever their strength is. If they're good on the outside, he gets on the inside. If they don't throw enough punches, he's going to outwork them. If they're good on the inside and he doesn't want to get on the inside, he bombs them from the outside. He just has a way of gradually taking control of a bout. And once he has control, and it's usually by like the fourth round, his opponents have not, to date, have not been able to regain control or to take control from him.
Are you surprised that Abraham has had such a failure in this tournament, considering coming in he was one of the favorites? What's happened?
I favored him to win. What's happened? He's been in there with really good fighters. I mean, go to BoxRec and look at the records of Andre Durrell and Carl Froch and Andre Ward when they fought him. And, I mean, I think we're talking about like 70 victories against 2 losses. You know, Froch's only loss was a close fight to Kessler, and Durrell's only loss was a controversial points loss to Froch in Froch's hometown. Both Ward and Durrell were Olympians, U.S. Olympians. They medaled in the 2004 Olympics. They are superb athletes. They are the best athletes in the division, along with Lucien Boutet. And Carl Froch is just one of the most. I mean, you know it. You can tell that Froch is smart when you hear him talk in a post-fight interview, or when if you watch the Fight Camp 360 series on the Super 6 tournament. He's just an intelligent dude, but he's also he has uncommon durability and strength and versatility. I mean, he showed that against Arthur Abraham, that he can box, and he showed that he can box and slug against Mikkel Kessler, even though that was a losing effort. And he showed that he can just be a juggernaut and walk a man down and break him down against Jermaine Taylor, you know, just before the Super 6 tournament. So these are exceptional athletes. These aren't your typical contenders that Abraham was fighting. And you know, Abraham, you know, I think at super middleweight, Abraham was the big guy. He was the bigger, stronger guy most of the time. And in the Super 6 tournament, he's fighting guys who are bigger than he is. They're taller, they're rangier, they have thicker bones, and they concede that he's still strong, but they're strong too, and they're not just physically strong. They're better boxers. They're more versatile fighters than he is. And I'll tell you what, I think they're all three of the guys that beat Abraham are a little bit smarter than he is. I don't think Abraham's a dumb guy, but I don't think he's all that bright in the ring. I think he's somebody who had just become accustomed to, you know, manhandling his opposition. And when he can't manhandle his opposition, he loses something. So that was a bad pick on my part, Abraham. That's one of my worst predictions in a long time. Arthur Abraham will win the Super 6, you know.
Can't win them all, Doug.
It's like the joke of the tournament, you know. It's like, damn.
Is he making a mistake staying super middleweight? Because I heard after the fight he said he was going to stay super middleweight.
Yeah, I think he has trouble. I think he has to make 167, 168 pounds. I think he would drain himself making 160 pounds at his age. I think he's about 32. So he wants to stick it out at super middleweight, and I think he can have a bit of a shelf life. I mean, I still think he's a good test for an up-and-comer, you know, like a young contender or an up-and-coming prospect, somebody like Peter Quillen, or you know, a fringe contender who wants to become a real contender, somebody like a Peter Manfredo, or a former elite fighter who has fallen from grace and is trying to rebound from a loss or personal setbacks, like Kelly Pavlik. I mean, you know, I'm sure most fans and members of the media would say Abraham was exposed, he's done, he's never going to do anything. And they might be right about that, but I still wouldn't mind seeing him fight against certain fighters just based on their styles. I mean, I would watch Kelly Pavlik versus Arthur Abraham. I would watch that fight because Pavlik is not the superb athlete that Jarrell and Andre Ward are, and he's not as versatile as Carl Froch. I mean, he's kind of a plodding, come forward in a straight line guy, and I think that plays into some of Abraham's strengths. I think that would be a fun battle of attrition.
If he moved down to middle,
he has sub options. I'm just saying. I think Abraham has sub options. He could also go back to Germany and fight one of two super middleweight belt holders there, who are nowhere near as talented and versatile as the guys he's had to face in the Super 6 tournament.
If he moved down to middleweight, would that be a decent purse if he fought Sergio Martinez?
If HBO would clear that for Martinez, I'm sure Martinez's people would take that fight in a New York minute. They would love that fight. But it seems Sergio Martinez, the HBO, holds Sergio Martinez to a tougher standard than they do other fighters. They don't clear a lot of guys for Sergio Martinez. They want him to fight. They want him to fight this elite opposition or as close to elite as possible. And let's face it, Arthur Abraham is no longer considered an elite fighter. In fact, he may not be considered a top 10 contender at super middleweight any longer.
Yeah, you could be right. I just like to play my dream matchmaking game. You know,
Sure.
would this fight work? Would that fight work? Before we let you out, Pacquiao and Mosley. You know, I don't know what to say. If you were trying to recruit a boxing fan and said, "Here you go," I don't know if that person's coming back just based on that one fight.
They would come back if they stopped watching right after the Arce Vasquez fight, right after
Correct.
Jorge Arce won that 122-pound title belt from Wilfredo Vasquez Jr. If they had to go home, if it was getting late, hey, I got to go, guys. I'm going to miss the main event. Let me know what happens, or DVR it for me or whatever. If he left after that fight, he or she left after the Arce fight, they're like, man, boxing is awesome. But if they stuck around, if they stuck out for the main event, they're not going to be too excited about our sport, which is not fair because that's just one fight. But that was a fight that was out there and marketed and pushed and hyped to the masses, which sucks. And a lot of folks. I mean, I got to tell you, I think we spoke before the fight. I just wasn't excited about that fight. I didn't want to cover it, and the way it is with RingTV.com. Most travel fights, Michael Rosenthal and I take turns traveling to, and this was a fight / event where I told Michael, "That's all yours, man. I have no desire to be there to cover this fight because I just don't see how Shane is going to be competitive. I mean, we can always conceive of ways that he can maybe make something happen, but the likelihood of Mosley actually doing that once he steps into the ring." Was remote. Having said that, I was still surprised that Mosley did as little as he did. That he basically boxed in retreat. That he was in survival mode for most of the fight. Maybe you could argue from the opening bell, but definitely from the third round knockdown on, he was just in there to go the distance. Save his pride in that respect, and to collect that hefty check that he will collect, which I don't like. I don't like that at all because Mosley talked about knockouts going into the fight. Mosley talked that talk really well. I think Mosley sold the fight just as much as Bob Arum, the promoter of the event, and Showtime, the American network that produced and distributed the pay-per-view event here in the States. They did a great job. Arum and his company Top Rank and Showtime, they did an amazing job pushing this fight to the public, and I think they convinced a lot of people, which probably explains some of the rancor, some of the venom, some of the anger and frustration that members of the media lashed out with, because I think more than a few folks kind of bought into the whole, well, styles make fights, and this is going to be fun while it lasts. Well, it wasn't fun, and it lasted way too long, and it started way too late. And
amen to that.
Mosley never had a shot, and he didn't even try. So it was just a huge egg that was laid by Mosley. Everybody did their part, including Mosley, until the bell rang. And then one guy did not do his part, and that was Shane, and it basically ruined the fight and it ruined the event,
Just
and it really sucks if it ruins if it turns away fight fans. That really sucks because that shouldn't be. There's the sport is the product is still good. Boxing is still great when it's done right. That just wasn't done right. That was just business. When the business supersedes the sport, there's a problem. And I know you can never divest the sport from the business. We need the business to to fuel the sport, but when it just becomes about getting the W and making money, that's no good. That's not worth watching. It never is. Never has been.
Just a couple more questions. It looks like Marquez is probably next for Pacquiao. I personally see Pacquiao probably fighting Tops 4 more times, and I'm worried that Floyd Mayweather might not be in that 4. Am I maybe?
I don't think he will be. No, I don't think you're being negative, because if these guys really wanted to fight each other, they would have done it by now. There's no excuse for them not to fight. Not in terms of money, not in terms of their legacies. There's just no excuse for the fight not to happen. And when people ask me, is Manny Pacquiao an all-time great fighter? Is Floyd Mayweather an all-time great fighter? I say no. If I'm putting together a top 25 list of the greatest fighters of all time, I cannot include them. And I will include guys who have come around in recent years, like in the last 20 to 25 years. I will include guys like Pernell Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez in like a top 30 pound for pound of all time, because they did fight the best in their respective divisions, particularly when it was the fight that everybody wanted, and they didn't let anything get in the way. Particularly Pernell Whitaker. Particularly Whitaker, who, in order to make that super fight with Julio Cesar Chavez in 1993, took place in San Antonio, Texas, where everybody knew Chavez would have the crowd cheering for him, that he would have 60,000 Mexicans there, all rooting for the Mexican hero, the Aztec warrior. And everybody knew if the fight was going to take place, Don King, Chavez's promoter, would have to be the lead promoter. And Whitaker, who had an exclusive contract with HBO, also knew that if the distributor, the pay-per-view producer and distributor, was going to be Showtime, SET, Showtime Entertainment Television. That was the name of their pay-per-view arm at the time. And he did all that. He basically broke his contract with HBO, a network that was paying him very well to fight whoever. He went across the street to Showtime. He didn't use the networks as an excuse not to fight a guy who was perceived by many as the pound-for-pound best. He saw himself as the pound-for-pound best. And a lot of people agreed with him, but then a lot of people said, no, here's this guy from Mexico who has this unbelievable undefeated streak. This guy is 87-0. Floyd's crowing about being 40-0, 41-0. Chavez was 87-0, had dominated 3 weight classes, junior lightweight, lightweight, and junior welterweight. And the fight, he was saying, hey, I'm willing to go up to welterweight. And, so once this guy who half of the boxing world views as pound for pound best steps up into Whitaker's division, welterweight, Whitaker has to fight him. He's honor-bound to fight him. He wants to know himself. He wants to prove to everyone, no, I'm the best pound for pound, and I'm going to show you. And I don't care if I'm an HBO fighter and Chavez is a Showtime fighter. I don't care that Don King is Chavez's promoter and he's going to control everything, and that he basically runs the WBC, which is going to sanction the bout, and the WBC is going to choose the officials. I don't care if there's a chance that I might get robbed on the scorecards, and that's exactly what happened. He didn't care. He wanted to go in there and show what he can do, and he did it, and there was no big deal. There was no, that's a great, fighters fight. That's the bottom line, and Pacquiao used to do that. That was Pacquiao at junior featherweight and junior lightweight, and then once he stepped up and grabbed that just kind of a belt against David Diaz in the summer of 2008, and then in December 2008 fought Oscar De La Hoya, things began to change. Now, his next 2 fights I had no problem with. Ricky Hatton, Miguel Cotto, those were good fights for that time. But since the Miguel Cotto fight, which I believe was in late, November 2009, last year I didn't care. I covered the Joshua Clottey fight because It was an event. It was boxing going to a huge stadium, in a state-of-the-art stadium, Cowboy Stadium in Dallas. That was the story of the fight, and 50,000 people. That was the story of the fight right there. But when he fought Margarito in the same venue, no, I didn't travel to Dallas for that, because you know what? Just like with the Clottey fight, the outcome of that fight was never in doubt. And likewise with the Mosley fight a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, there's no reason for me to be there ringside for that fight and write 10 stories about that fight going into it, because the outcome was never in doubt. Nobody really thought that Mosley was going to win that fight. Everyone was just hoping that it was going to be entertaining. And it seems like that's the fighter that Manny is now, because anytime you ask him about who he wants to fight or what about Mayweather, can it happen, he says, well, Bob Arum is my promoter, and I leave it up to him. Well, Bob's a businessman, and he's in the Pacquiao business. He doesn't want Pacquiao to lose.
Right.
If there's one guy out there who might have the formula to beat Pacquiao, it's Mayweather. And Arum does not want the star of his stable to lose to a guy that he basically built up and he can't stand, you know. It's just not going to happen. And Mayweather has excuse after excuse after excuse. He doesn't really want to fight him. He's going to come up with whatever it takes not to get in the ring with him. And so these guys, to me, they're first ballot Hall of Famers, Mayweather and Pacquiao. Their accomplishments are great. They're fighters of their era. They're the best. They're two of the best fighters of the previous decade, along with, Bernard Hopkins and some other guys, Joe Calzaghe, you can toss him in there. But these guys, are they great? Nah, man, because fighters fight. That's all there is to it. If you're truly great, you want to prove it. And if there's somebody else that everybody is saying is the fighter of the decade or the best fighter on the planet, and you believe you're the fighter of the decade and the best fighter of the planet, and he's in your weight class, he's in your house, you fight him. No questions asked. You fight him, you make the damn fight. And these guys haven't made it, and I don't think they ever will.
Amen. One last question about Manny and one last question about Shane. Manny, let's say his next two fights, just hypothetically, are Marquez and Tim Bradley. Do they interest you at all?
Marquez does not interest me because they're fighting above 140 pounds, and Marquez is pushing it at lightweight. I mean, when a guy gets dropped and hurt by Michael Katsidis at lightweight, that tells you he's not suited to face a puncher, a hard puncher at welterweight. And that's what Pacquiao is at welterweight. He punches hard. Ask Shane Mosley. Mm-hmm. Ask Miguel Cotto if you don't believe it. I don't like that fight, and I'm not interested in it. It's just a money making opportunity for Juan Manuel Marquez, just like the Mosley fight was. Tim Bradley does interest me. Tim Bradley interests me because he is a solid, rock solid 140-pounder. He's young. He's a good athlete. He has a very difficult and tricky style, and he can carry weight over 140 pounds. He's proved that. In fact, he actually turned pro as a small welterweight. In the amateurs, he fought in the 152-pound division. So he is a big junior welterweight, even though he's pretty short. He's 5'7", and he has a difficult style. He doesn't have a style that Pacquiao has become accustomed to. A Pacquiao will just beat the hell out of anyone who dares walk him down, like he did David Diaz and De La Hoya and Antonio Margarito. He loves that. If you just walk to him, he just beats you up as he's kind of backing up and moving around you. And if you try to run from him, you can't do that. I mean, ask Shane Mosley and Miguel Cotto after their hard knockdowns. They tried to backpedal and hope something would happen, but you can't win rounds like that against Manny Pacquiao. He'll just casually walk you down and land the majority of hard punches. But Bradley doesn't do either of those things. He's in and out, and he's in and he'll hold you, and he's really strong, and he's coming in with that head as well, and he's got quick hands, and he's kind of got, I don't want to call it herky-jerky, but it's a somewhat unorthodox, or I'll call it a unique style. It's just Tim's style, and I think that style could cause problems, and by virtue of that fact, or what I believe to be what I think might happen, that interests me. Just by virtue of the fact that he has a tricky style, and he's young, and he's in his athletic prime, and he's physically strong, and he's got speed. That's interesting to me, and that's a fight that I would I would be happy to cover. I would be happy to travel to Vegas or wherever that fight might land if Pacquiao fought Timothy Bradley.
I would agree with you on both counts. The only thing I would say about Pacquiao and Marquez is I have enough, maybe it's optimism, maybe it's hope, maybe it's faith that Marquez doesn't go out essentially a quitter, which is almost what Shane Mosley did.
He'll never do that. Yeah, I don't think he'll do that. I think we've seen just, I don't know, maybe it's a cultural thing. You know, we see these Mexican veterans like Eric Morales and Jorge Arce and Marquez, who's older than both guys. And you look at their records, and you're like, you've got to be done. You've got to be done fighting. You've had so many wars. It has to be some time where you go to the well and you don't have that fire in the belly. You don't have that passion. But look what happens. No, man, these guys, I just think they're just going to put it down no matter what. So I have no doubt about that. It's going on a shield. I mean, look at the difference how Tiny Marquez fought Floyd Mayweather as opposed to the way Mosley fought him. Yeah, Mosley had that one wobbly moment in the second round, but after that he was befuddled and he wasn't really making a concentrated effort to get in there and hurt the dude. But Marquez, he's the guy who got dropped early. He's the guy who had to pick himself up off the canvas, and he was trying every round. He couldn't do any damn thing, but he was trying. So, I mean, you know, the dude's he's going to get a legendary effort because he's a legendary fighter. But you know what? We have weight classes for a reason. And to me, he's proven to be pushing it at lightweight and ineffective over 140 pounds, which is why it's very hard for me to get excited about Pacquiao Marquez 3, even though I have the utmost respect for the Mexican lightweight champ.
Here's my last question for you, Doug, and I hope it's not the last question ever because I actually consider it somewhat absurd myself, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But Shane Mosley supposedly, you know, not good blood with Oscar De La Hoya anymore. And I know Oscar's retired. I think you see where this question's going. Is there any chance that for a money purpose only, Oscar comes out of retirement, Shane comes, you know, reconcile, third fight, and maybe it's it for both of them? I hope that doesn't happen. I'm not rooting for it.
Why? You know why? Because you know what, Shane's going to keep fighting, and I think he really needed to make this fight. Regardless, that's why he split with Golden Boy to ensure that Aaron would sign off on the Pacquiao fight. He did all that because he needed the money.
Right.
And Oscar doesn't need the money. Oscar did not have a costly divorce, and he's made a whole lot money, a hell of a lot more money in boxing than Mosley has, and a hell of a lot more money in outside business ventures. And he's got good people taking good care of that money. He's fine. He doesn't need to come back. I don't think he feels that fire in the belly anymore, but I tell you what, I believe Golden Boy would reconcile with Mosley in order to use Mosley as a stepping stone for some of their younger fighters like Saul Canelo Alvarez and Victor Ortiz. That's where I can see the reconciliation coming, because those would be big fights in the Southern California area. I mean, Shane's a Southern Californian, and he's a very good B-side when he's put in against an attraction. And Canelo is already an attraction, even here in California. And Victor Ortiz is somebody who, in a couple of fights, particularly if he fights here in California, he can build up a pretty dedicated following himself. So I could see them reconciling in order just to use Shane and use his name to build up their budding young stars.
Doug, I want to thank you so much, not only for the interview, but you're going to give me a good night's sleep, because I didn't want to see Mosley De La Hoya 3, but, you know, just knowing the way things work sometimes. No,
I know.
It did scare me.
It doesn't make you a conspiracy theorist, not in boxing. No, it makes you kind of a realist, really. But no, I don't see it happening.
Good. I'm glad it wasn't so absurd that you will actually come back to the sports buffet again in the future. And Doug, as always, we appreciate it, and have a great few weeks of fights coming up.
I will. Anytime.
Doug Fischer on the Sports Buffet Podcast. Doug, I appreciate it, man.
Hey, anytime, Bob.
No problem. Have a good one.